Go ahead.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. We do want to get right into it, so we're going to start here right at the top of the hour. For those in the Midwest, it's your lunch hour, so hopefully you're enjoying a good meal. And for those that are outside of the Midwest time zone, glad to have you during this time and taking time out of your day. So our focus today is around security in the cloud with focus on power systems. Tom, why don't we just give a quick overview of Fortra and Meridian? I'll start, and then why don't you give a quick overview of Fortra. But Meridian IT, we've been an IBM business partner since 1992, so a long time. We've been focused on IBM power systems that entire time. We have a cloud group that started in 2010. So we've been performing and supporting cloud for about 13 years. So very mature practice. So excited to bring some of our information forward for everyone today. Tom, do you want to share an update on Fortra?
Yeah, Fortra. So Fortra might be a new name for even some of our existing customers. About a year ago, we had a name change from Help Systems after 40 years of being Help Systems to Fortra, and really to signify that the Help Systems company had become much more than just a IBM power company. That's a very big part of our business, but today, really 80% of our revenue comes from cybersecurity and all walks of life. When you look at it, on-premise, hybrid, in the cloud, we're helping people with cybersecurity all over the globe in battling against the bad actors of the world. And then, of course, the power business has always been near and dear to our heart, my heart, being an IBM power champion and having the power tech and robot solutions and SQL solutions that have been out there for years, helping customer out on IBM I. Definitely important business for us and will continue to be that way. So that's Fortra today. So great to be with you, and back over to you, Tom.
Great. Can you just roll to the next slide there, Tom? So our intention today is to share information that's helpful to you. So I'll call them nuggets. So hopefully for the attendees, you'll receive some nuggets that can help you with your cloud stance and your security within your cloud. So I'm going to start with a couple of slides here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Scott and Tom together. So Scott and Tom, why don't we have you introduce yourself when it comes to your first slide, and we'll just keep rolling here for a matter of time, okay?
Yeah.
So Tom, why don't you go to the next slide?
Very good.
Great. Okay, we just wanted to highlight a couple of things that are happening in the market now. Everyone hears about cyber attacks left and right, and really how does it impact business? So I just wanted to share just a few examples. Tom and I were just talking about, if you joined the session early, about the the Tech Exchange event IBM held in Las Vegas. And during that event, which was held in September, the MGM was hit by a ransomware, and you may have heard of it. So it was basically, actually it wasn't necessarily ransomware, it was a virus attack. And a group called Scattered Spider, they went in and they basically shut down systems, and they took 6 terabytes of data that impacted MGM for 10 days. And MGM has not yet announced what the dollar impact has been, but it's estimated at $100 million. So think about that, basically $1 million per day. So customers were not able to check in at the hotel. Their slot machines were down. If someone had a card to get into their room, some of the cards didn't work. So it did impact both the resort on site and some of the online transactions. So if you're a gambling person, hopefully you weren't hit by that, but obviously that's one example. The other example I'll give is Dole, which is here on the screen. So back in February of this year, they were hit hard, and a virus took down their systems, both their internal systems and systems that affected end users. And Dole, being a publicly traded company, they did issue their quarterly report after that. And in that quarterly report, it stated that the impact had about a $10.5 million hit on their business. So they're a large business, right? Over $6 billion, but $10 million, I don't care how large you are, $10 million is still a large number. And then the other one that I'll mention is the Colonial Pipeline. So some of you may remember this one. So the Colonial Pipeline is the gas pipeline that provides gas up from the south, the Middle Eastern Southeast, up as far as New York. So what happened there was it was truly ransomware. They basically said, hey, we have your systems. We have not yet shut the pipeline down, but we could if we wanted to. And those bad actors were asking for $4.4 million in Bitcoin. So within hours of the attack, they did make that arrangement and issue $4.4 million of Bitcoin to that party. Now, they stole about, they shut down some systems. They stole about 100 gigabytes of data. But, interestingly, about 2 months later, the Department of Justice was able to recover some of the Bitcoin, valued at about 2.3 million. So they paid 4.4, they got about 2.3 back. So it ended up costing them about 2.1. But even outside of those dollars, it was the actual threat. And can you imagine if the main gas line to a good part of our country was shut down? So, don't want to, share, black clouds are coming our way, but I think we're all hearing that these threats are hitting all size companies, large, small. Sometimes we hear about them and sometimes we don't. I have one last example that I didn't put on my slide, but I heard of a company that privately held and all their employees began using their Gmail and Yahoo email accounts one day. Well, sure enough, it came out that they were held ransom. Their systems had some gaps. So this is a company that most of us would never have heard of, but now that it's hit the news, there's been some brand damage. Obviously, their customers are probably wondering about data and so forth. So even at the small level, security is very important. So next slide, Tom. Okay, Tom, I'd like to actually turn this over to you. And why don't you also introduce yourself before you provide the overview?
Sounds good, Tom. Thank you. Yeah, Tom Huntington. I'm our EVP of Technical Solutions at the Fortra company. I spend a majority of my time working with business partners like Meridian IT and our customers around the globe talking about the IBM Power environment and everything that Fortra does. One of the other things that I do on behalf of the Fortra company and really the IBMI community is I started a marketplace study some 10 years ago. And the study is open, by the way. The survey is open right now. If you want to find a link to it, you can go out onto my LinkedIn and just search under me and you'll find a link for taking the survey. We'd appreciate if you do that. But one of the things that we ask people every year is what are their top 5 concerns as they plan their IT environment? And cybersecurity on Power has been number 1. And it is number 1, but I don't think everybody who's thinking about IBMI is really taking it as serious as they should. We also do the free security scans that we'll talk about a little bit later, and we see a lot of poorly configured IBMI environments, and kind of really hence the reason behind the story here today as we talk about cybersecurity in the cloud. Before we get too far down the road, we want to know where you're at. Are you using cloud for any of your IBMI workload today? So we got a very simple polling question. Yes, you are already. No, you're not, or you're not sure if you're in the cloud or not. It's going so well, it's just up there. And we'll give you a few moments to answer that. As I said earlier, the marketplace survey is open. Please fill it out because IBM, Meridian, Fortra, many other business partners and some that are with us today use the results from the survey to help plan what they do for the IBM Power business. And it's all important to all of us to have an ecosystem that is listening to its customers, and the survey is one of those ways that we can do that. So let's close the results here and share them. It looks like, all right, guys, we have 25% of the market already is in some form of cloud, maybe private or public. And then 70% are no, and a few not sure's because they're maybe not as involved with their infrastructure as others are. So thank you for answering that polling question, and let's turn it over to Tom again. Tom Horan.
Sorry about that, Tom. I was wrestling with my mute button. Well, thank you very much, Tom. Why don't you go to the next slide?
And over to Scott.
Yep. The slide is not advancing for me, Tom.
They're not.
I still see the quick poll as well.
Oh, okay. You guys, thank you.
Oh, there we go. Great.
Yep.
So Scott, why don't you take it from here and please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everybody. Scott Jaitley, Senior Cloud Architect. I've been migrating on-prem to cloud workloads since 2013. I'm AWS and Azure certified. Have specialized in data analytics and data lake enablement activities within AWS and Azure. So happy to have this conversation. You know, being in the cloud is great, right? A lot of us understand the agility, flexibility, the cost efficiencies that come with the cloud. And some customers, you know, are on-prem managing their infrastructure, but that's not the focus of their core business, and they want to relieve themselves of that. AWS has about a 34% market share right now, and you know their value prop is really forget about the managing the infrastructure, comes to the cloud. The cost efficiencies, agility, and scalability are here, right? There's an ability to have continuous innovation and modernize your infrastructure and application portfolios. However, with that ability and feature set comes a responsibility with security. And if we can advance to the next slide, there's something that's called the cloud shared responsibility model, and cloud service providers, Azure, AWS, GCP, they all have a version of this shared responsibility model. It's a misconception by many to think that once I'm in the cloud, it's the cloud provider's responsibility, total responsibility to take on security. That's not the case, right? It really, the shared responsibility model, if we could advance to the next slide now, it has to do with security in the cloud versus security of the cloud, right? It separates who's responsible for what when we operate in the cloud, and we should think of it as a partnership rather than just a delineation and a delegation of total security. So infrastructure and hardware at the infrastructure management level, it is the cloud provider's responsibility, right? Security of that infrastructure and hardware. When we think about operating system and software, it starts to traverse that line of delineation between the cloud service provider and the customer. Here it's listed in orange, but you know, really, I would say there's probably more of a gray area from an operating system and software, right? This software is more about AWS software that they deploy on their stack. But if it's a customer client side and server side software that's installed on VMs, that becomes, you know, a customer and your responsibility. Middleware and runtime, that's kind of a shared responsibility from an API and platform configuration, right? The default configuration sets within any cloud provider are intended to be secure. However, there is always a need for fine tuning that. And if we could kind of advance to the next slide, the core security risks, we're going to be touching on viruses and ransomware to begin with. Today, you know, cyber attacks aren't just isolated incidents. They're widespread, as Tom Horan had mentioned a few recent current events. Small businesses or you know, global enterprises, no one's really immune. And we have ransomware and viruses take on a few shapes, and there are a lot of implications around that, right? What ransomware does is it encrypts your data, it gives the keys to bad actors, allowing them to extort money or some type of action out of the targeted organization. So, and ransomware operators, they demand payment in exchange for the decryption key. So it causes financial loss, reputational damage, operational disruption, and you know, many organizations have had to pay payments to these criminal organizations, which in certain jurisdictions have legal consequences. So what do we do, right? From a solutioning standpoint, we have to be proactive rather than reactive in these scenarios, and take a more holistic security posture and approach on our cybersecurity in the cloud. And it goes beyond just traditional antivirus. It's a cybersecurity monitoring and antivirus protection. That's part of the solution. And I'll turn it over to Tom Huntington to take on the next.
Thank you, Scott. And so when you think about the solution to the problem, it's about having protection in place. And at the Fortra company for 2 decades now, specifically for IBMI, we've been able to protect its server in on-premise or in the cloud by being able to scan for viruses and rid them of that type of object on the server in the IFS area. More recently, and I say recently because it's 2 years versus the 20-year period, we've also added in ransomware protection. Again, some of those organizations that Tom Horan talked about earlier, I know in the past, and they may still have IBMI in the mix, and IBMI can also get ransomware. And we do extend this to everything Power. So we do this for Linux, Linux x86, Linux on Power, AIX, and we also have Solaris too. So I add a few additional items to it. But whether you move any of those footprints to the cloud, don't just assume that being in the cloud, you're immune to viruses and ransomware.
The next component here is protecting yourself with user access controls, tighter user access controls. The stat, approximately 88% of all data breaches are caused by an employee mistake. It tells you that it's not only external actors that we should be worried about, but internal user permissions and user permission sets that can be exploited, right? And so customers need to implement strong access controls. User authentication protocols are important. The access control mechanism of whether that's mandatory access control, discretionary access control, or here role-based access control, we want to move towards that least privileged model of role-based access control, which is not native, but maybe easier to implement in x86 systems, but definitely something that we could also do with IBMI if done correctly. And think through the object level security, protect the files, directories, and other objects that are given permission to by these roles that are created. Limited privilege model and network access restrictions, making sure that we're following the limited privilege user model, but also taking into account networking restrictions and session management. And of course, always doing regular audits and monitoring of all of these systems so that we're getting visibility into any alerts, any issues.
Scott, one of the things that we see a lot of is overusage of all object authority on the IBMI platform. And this is kind of a carryover from some of the legacy or older systems that are around. And so some of the things that we can help people out with is just simply reporting on the amount of all object authority on the systems through a tool like Compliance Monitor, or we do even have a privileged access tool to help with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other ability to provide the audit and log history that we need for this activity. Just 1 second, we're getting a little feedback.
Almond butter.
All right, sorry, apologize for that. So with compliance reporting, it gives us the ability to provide the reporting on the settings that you have from user access and what they have access to, and along with the critical settings related to security, related to system values, related to library, IFS access. And then another, as Scott talked about, credentials, layering in multi-factor authentication for the IBMI customer with a solution from PowerTech that gives you the ability to secure your biometrics on or secure your sign-on access by implementing additional level of authentication as you sign into the IBM server with multi-factor authentication. Back to you, Scott, to talk about intrusion protection.
Yeah, so if we have access controls under lock and key and we have a sufficient, level of monitoring in place for that access, we should start thinking about, well, the external actors coming in from the outside, how do we protect ourselves against that, right? And one of the main culprits here are poorly configured network security, right? We have to understand that it's a two-pronged strategy, right? It's detection and then response, right? So we want to make sure that these configurations are being detected and a remediation step is recommended and put into place and in a timely manner. So there are tools out there that Fortra and Meridian can put into place that do exactly that. And firewalls aren't enough, right? They're just cloud firewalls put into place. They're a must-have. These API gateway firewalls are a must-have. IP controlling whitelisting and blacklisting security groups within the cloud are definitely there, but there are other systems and other tools from a monitoring perspective that can do much more, right? And really aggregate the data and give you a one pane view of what's happening on your network and what to react to. Many of these cloud systems, they harness machine learning and AI, and to say, what is a normal usage pattern and packet traversing from one point to another for something that is suspicious and should be looked into. And backlog and logging and monitoring is key to all of what we're discussing in security of the cloud.
Yeah, Scott, and one of the things that we've seen over the years is that poorly configured systems moved to the cloud are still poorly configured in the IBMI world of things. And we've seen customers who are surprised by the fact that somehow some IP address is trying to sign on to their IBMI system through FTP, SQL, JDBC, communication access like that. IBMI, again, by people outside of the platform, they think of it as a legacy system and all green screen, but it isn't. More of the access today is to the database where your critical data is, and it's coming through, things like JDBC, FTP, ODBC, stuff like that. And so if you're not monitoring the provided exits from IBM, you have no idea who the IP addresses are, the users that are using these types of applications on the server. And what we do is we basically put a IBMI-based firewall around these applications that can be used to access your most critical data. We log it, we track it, and we block it. So it truly is a firewall. And without a tool like this, quite honestly, on IBMI, you have no idea who's accessing it. And when you think about security breaches, whether on in the cloud or on private, the security breaches often happen because somebody clicks on a bad email or somebody makes a mistake in configuration, right? And that's where the surprise comes in when we talk about intrusion detection, is that somebody along the way changed some value that allowed a bad actor in.
Absolutely. So, the next one here is unprotected data. It's a risk. We want to keep people out as much as we can, but if they're in the system, we want to keep our data protected so that if there are bad actors in the system, that we minimize the risk of losing that data or having that data stolen from us. So what can we do? There's data encryption at rest and in motion. Field level encryption, which are private or PII data that might be necessary to encrypt at the field level. There's data masking and tokenization, obfuscating the data so that it's encrypted and masked and tokenized, so that only individuals with privileged accesses can access the data and actually see the PII data or PHI data on your systems. We monitor the databases. Database monitoring is key to protect your data, tracking, monitoring all the access and flagging and alerting any suspicious activity. Data redaction, making sure we're replacing, it's kind of like tokenization, but not having on-screen visibility, but underlying data might not be tokenized or masked, so that on-screen captures or threats that take screenshots or can capture screen images are not stealing sensitive data. And regularly backing up, right? Having a business continuity plan and regular backup DR plan in place. So, and it goes back to least privilege principles of making sure that people have limited access to only the data that they need.
Yeah, if you think about it, there's a lot of disk encryption and things like that that are out there, but that still doesn't protect you from somebody printing the data, viewing the data. And so that's when PowerTech comes into play again for encryption on the IBMI platform. We can do it at the field level, we can do it in the IFS, but encrypt just the information and allow just those who need to see it to be able to see it. And people are storing bank account numbers, social security numbers, still credit card numbers, and many other PII data on the platform that in the wrong hands, it becomes a problem out there for the users that are being exploited. So the importance of encryption is very, very critical here.
Great, and the last security threat and category that we're discussing today is poorly architected cloud deployments, right? The foundation of deploying to the cloud matters, right? We call this the landing zone foundation configurations. The default empty container that cloud service providers offer are not as secure, and they're not customized for our customers, for you, right? So misconfigured security settings is key. We need to make sure we detect and actually implement the correct foundation so that we could build on top of that, and making sure that we're narrowing that attack surface. Also, bad actor protection for your HA and DR regions, making sure, again, from a permissions and controls and networking constraints, that bad actors cannot move from your regular production environments into any type of HA/DR regions as well. There are legacy integration challenges. While deploying into the cloud, there are IBMI isn't on an island. There are x86, Linux, Windows, other external third-party services and APIs that would need to be reached out to or data collected from. Sometimes it's easier to, because of the complexities and the challenges of implementation between these disparate systems, we simplify and forget about security. It's important to plan ahead and make sure that these interfaces and integrations are secure and managed and monitored. And the key to the deployments and incorrectly deploying into the cloud is being prepared for it, right? Migration best practices, making sure that we do it right and get the landing zone correct the first time.
That's a great point, Scott. As we've talked to many of customers, one of the biggest challenges for them is understanding that IBMI is a little different than moving a x86 Windows VM to the cloud. We typically come from a scale-up type environment when we move IBMI to the cloud, and so we have more data, more processor, more memory, all those things that make it a bit more challenge to move to the cloud and then to get it right. So when you move to cloud, you want to kind of plan for just-in-time consumption. So you want to you're not planning for 3 years, you're planning for the next month, and you want to make sure that you size your system at the right collection performance level. And so Performance Navigator is a tool that we've had for many years at the Fortra company. We do a lot of on-premise sizing, but this is a perfect tool to also help plan your future in the cloud. And by doing the right consultancy, the right planning, your experience can be really, really good. And then the other side of it is migrating your data. What's the best practice for migrating your data? Well, in the IBMI world, because of the amount of data here, we like to be able to do things concurrently. And then when you're ready to actually move to the cloud, we do what we call a role swap to switch you from on-premise to the cloud. And in that case, we're using tools like our Robot HA product, which takes advantage of the built-in IBM journaling, remote journaling, to keep your databases in sync. We also have a tool called File Catalyst for doing very large volumes of data transfers in a environment where the servers are located far apart from each other, being able to take and condense and send large quantities of data from one server to another. That's something to take advantage of too. So migrating your data, planning out the move of that data is critical to the success of your cloud transition and your migration. And along the way, what we need to always continue to think about is, security awareness, making our team aware of what's important when it comes to security. And you just can't let your guards down because you don't know when that next problem is going to occur. So making your infrastructure secure, securing the data, and to continue to be due diligent around your security, even in the cloud. Not that the cloud is not a great experience for people, but we want to make sure that your experience when it comes to cloud security is a good one. Right, Mr. Scott?
Absolutely. We covered a lot of ground here. So,
Yes.
making sure we're protected against virus and ransomware protection. And I think the common theme here is let's educate our teams and educate ourselves and partner with the right folks that can do the work and that have done it before, and protect against all the threats that have been mentioned.
Perfect. Thanks, Scott. And just, one of the things that we always start out with when it comes to security in the IBMI world is our free security scan and analysis from the Fortra company. If you think about it, it's about a $2,500 value that we do for free. It runs in a couple minutes on your server. And then we have the value part is we have a discussion with your team and go through and explain what we found on your server. And that is of great value to you as an organization. And sometimes to me, it's amazing, Scott and Tom, the number of customers that don't want to do it because they don't want their team to know how bad their security is on the platform. So it's kind of an ironic thing that does happen. While we wait for some questions to come in, feel free to send some questions in. I'm going to put out our last polling question, and how can Fortra and Meridian IT help you? We first of all have the free security scan, and you should be able to select more than one: cloud security discussion itself, cloud deployment, cloud migration, or send some free swag. I think it was Mr. Horan that promised that, right?
That's right.
Awesome, awesome. So go ahead and fill out that last polling question. And we do have a question coming in here. And let's see here from John. Has anyone been successful moving IBMI to the cloud? We hear a lot of different stories. Have they been successful? I think Tom and Scott, you guys have been doing this for years.
Sure, Scott, why don't you chime in here? But yeah, so we've been Meridian experience moving to the cloud. There's different ways to do it, and there's different types of cloud. So we've performed over 300 cloud migrations for IBMI, and depending on the size of the workload, what cloud you're moving to, tolerance for downtime, how much your team would like to participate in the migration, those type of things impact the project. So the definitive answer is yes, and then the approach is tailored to you. So
Very good. Thanks, Tom. And then another question we had out here before I close the poll is, have there been any IBMI security breaches we can share? And I'll take that one on, Tom. And you know, the answer is yes, there has been. I can't share who, but I will say that we've seen ransomware on IBMI. We've seen viruses on IBMI. We've had customers in government locations have ransomware. We've had insurance companies with many viruses that we've seen out in their IFS, and nobody had an idea that they existed out there and re-impacting the rest of the infrastructure. I know of a large healthcare organization that had numerous viruses and took their infrastructure down just a year or so ago. Now that was AIX actually. So I often hear from the AIX guys, it can't happen here. You know, I'm the best security administrator in the world. It won't happen on my servers, and yet it happens to the AIX guys too. So just not IBMI, of course. And then the other thing, you know, we've done POCs with customers with our intrusion detection exit point manager software, and we've seen the IP addresses from other countries that they don't do business with trying to sign on to IBMI, and people have no idea that that's going on. So some really eye-opening experiences. You know, and I go back to ransomware. I think Scott talked earlier about backups. Make sure that you're doing backups, because if you have to restore from ransomware, that is your first media that you're going to go to, is you're going to restore from it. So let me close the polling question. I want to thank everybody for their time today and for the questions that we got from the audience. Do appreciate that. Scott and Tom, any final words of advice for people when they think about security in the cloud?
Oh gosh, what a question, Tom.
I know.
It was mentioned earlier by Scott, but security has to be cultural. So to make sure your employees are focused on security, and it should be in every conversation you have around not just cloud, but outside of cloud. So I'll pull up that point again. I think it's cultural to your company.
Very good.
Scott, anything?
No, that's everything. I think we covered a lot.
Yeah, we did. Well, thank you all. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you on another future webinar from Fortra or Meridian. Scott and Tom, it's been a pleasure working with you today. Make it a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tom, as always. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.